Here we are again from Juventum, the interview series live. And today I have the pleasure again to speak with Paul Watson. Paul, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Oh, I have to say, and I want to say again, as we spoke briefly before, I'm very glad we can speak again, do this interview again. Thank you that you are available. And I want to give to everyone who is listening to this or watching this video the kind of context. First of all, I want to say this interview will also be uploaded to our audio platform, or there's also more information on it about other things, but it's called Free Talk Radio, or the platform is freetalkradio.com. And I want to give a theme to this interview, which is the sanctuaries. But again, to give more the context, Paul, we did an interview last year in May. And then I asked you at the end, could we maybe do an interview again? And you said, yeah, of course, and reach out and see how things are. And it turned out then at some moment, I found out, and I was actually approached from your team, basically. And I did an interview in December then with Charlie Humphrey. And then, what happened was, you were basically in a prison in Greenland, and some things happened still then between December and now. And of course, you are out, you are on this interview again. So therefore, very, very happy. And again, what I said to you before, also my heartfelt best wishes and for the cause and everything to you. And again, I want to highlight still it's great and it's so necessary, right? That we sometimes have a lot of courage, that we have a lot of persistence, and that we have sometimes the people who help us. Like, for example, Charlie, his wife, Tiffany, was very instrumental, and sometimes also, I would say, prominent supporters. And to, again, give the context, you were, for our organization, Juventum, our first prominent supporters. So it was no question for me to jump on an interview in December with Charlie and to somehow have a conversation and discuss and hopefully help, in your case, at that moment in time when you were in prison in Greenland. So the first kind of item I want to cover here with you is actually around that time in prison, and more basic, more specifically, I think the release from Greenland, but what has also then happened afterwards, because you said, I think during that time, what has to happen next is to get to Interpol and to cancel a red notice from Interpol. And this both basically has been accomplished in the meantime. So I want you to share your perspective on these two things. Again, the release from Greenland and this cancellation of the Interpol red notice.
Okay, so what's your question then?
The question is first, maybe with the release from Greenland, what was maybe the kind of important factors or people besides, I would say, your persistence and your firm belief and experience having dealt with challenging situations that you would say brought you out of that situation?
Well, first of all, my arrest in Greenland I saw as a situation that presented an opportunity to focus attention on the real crime here, and that was the illegal killing of whales by Japan in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. So I was able to use that experience and turn it into a 5-month campaign to not only focus attention on Japan's illegal activities, but also to focus attention on Denmark's illegal operations in the Faroe Islands, where they kill pilot whales and dolphins in violation of the European Union Berne Convention. So I looked on the entire 5 months as a campaign, and a very effective campaign.
And when it came to, I also read in between, there was with the whalers, again, Japanese whalers and the, let's say, more build up, or again, of a political, but ultimately an arrest, where it came to the situation that some years ago you were actually also detained here where I'm now located in Frankfurt, Germany. And again, then there is the cancellation of this Interpol red notice. How were you so clear that this has to happen next? And how, what do you think made the difference that that was achieved?
Well, in 2012, I wasn't aware of any arrest warrant until I arrived in Frankfurt in Germany, and suddenly I was told that there was a warrant out for my arrest, and not by Japan, but by Costa Rica. Didn't tell me why or what, but I was in prison in Frankfurt for 9 days, and then they let me out for 2 months on house arrest. And while that was happening, Japan put in an extradition request. This wasn't a red notice. This was just an extradition request. Germany didn't have to, cooperate. They didn't have an extradition treaty with Japan. But the particular minister of justice in Germany at the time was quite hostile. I mean, I actually had a lot of support from the prosecutors, the judge. People in Germany are very supportive, but it went down to the minister of justice, and she wasn't too nice. Anyway, I got a call from a supporter inside the Ministry of Justice on a Friday, saying that when I reported to the police on the Monday, that I would be detained and then extradited to Japan, not Costa Rica, but to Japan, which sound pretty suspicious to me that there was a lot of political stuff going on in the background. So I decided I had to leave because if I go to Japan, there was no coming back. So I left Germany. It was difficult because the German government had both my passports, my Canadian and US passport. But I made my way to the coast of the Netherlands, and Lamias and Lamias Sea Shepherd, France, managed to arrange for a sailboat to take me across the Atlantic. I landed at night in Nova Scotia, went ashore there. Then I crossed into the US, again without any papers. I crossed the US and had my other vessel, the Bridge of Bardot, pick me up off of Catalina Island. And then we went across the North and the South Pacific to rendezvous with my flagship, the Steve Irwin, which I joined. And then we took that down to the Southern Ocean for another confrontation with the Japanese whaling industry, this time our most effective campaign, because they only took 10% of their quota that year. And after that, I spent 6 months in exile in the South Pacific Islands, and till John Kerry, the Secretary of State of the United States, looked at the evidence and said I could come to the US, which I did. But I had this red notice issued against me by Japan and by Costa Rica. And so that lasted for 14 years. So the Japanese have been in pursuit of me. In 2017, Costa Rica withdrew the red notice with a change of government, which indicates how political it was. You just don't drop criminal charges because of a change of government. But anyway, it looked like that red notice was dropped in November. It was no longer on the computers anywhere. I went through the Irish immigration, didn't come up on the computer. And then we headed off on the ship to go through the Northwest Passage to Japan. But we had to refuel in Nuuk in Greenland. And while we were there, Denmark sent 12 police officers from Copenhagen. It was a very expensive operation. They flew them to Greenland to arrest me. And I thought that, well, that's a bit of an overkill. I mean, what's with the show of force? But I found out when I saw that the red notice described me as an extremely dangerous armed eco-terrorist. That's how Japan was looking at me. Now, here's the thing. I've never injured anybody in my life. I've never been convicted of a crime. I've never lost a civil case. So this is all very, very political, but Japan's a powerful country, so they get what they want. So as soon as this happened and I was detained in Greenland, that was my opportunity to turn this into a campaign against Japanese whaling.
And that ultimately, again, led then, after you have been released, to again the cancellation of the red notice, right?
Well, in 2017, my case was brought before the European Parliamentary Committee looking into the political abuses by Interpol. That was in 2017, but nothing happened. And then I also had a lawyer in Washington, D.C., make an appeal to Interpol in 2019, and they rejected that appeal. Now, because I was in prison in Greenland, I don't think Japan or Denmark anticipated the backlash and the support that I received, including support from President Macron of France, the Prime Minister of France, President of French Polynesia, the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, Pope Francis in the Vatican, plus 100,000 names, petitions that were signed, and support from celebrities and people like Jane Goodall and Sylvia Earle. They didn't anticipate this kind of support. Now, it's not really support for me as an individual, but I think it was support for what I stood for, which is upholding international conservation law as in areas like the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. The Japanese whaling operation is a criminal enterprise, and that's not my opinion. That's the judgment of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So what we have here is a criminal enterprise, a criminal operation that is abusing Interpol, an international authority, for political purposes in order to get what they want. So we did another appeal to Interpol, but this time there was a lot of publicity. And that appeal then, Interpol made the decision that the Interpol notice, the red notice given to Japan, was made for political reasons, and it was an abuse. And therefore, it was dismissed against me. It took a long time. Everything moves slowly when you're dealing with these international agencies. But in the end, they acknowledged that that Interpol red notice was issued for political purposes and had nothing to do with justice at all.
Okay. Thank you for saying all that, Paul. And as we spoke before, and what you also mentioned, now I wanted to, as a second item, speak about sanctuaries. The term of sanctuaries came up in the interview with Charlie, actually, to my surprise, because as we spoke also briefly before, I had learned about sanctuaries from a different angle, but what you also mentioned, from a sea perspective or ocean and whale perspective, there is for example, the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. And I want to ask you, what is your perspective on sanctuaries in the sea? How important is that? What is the term? Or is it protected? Or is it just, again,
No.
pardon my ignorance, but again, I just want to ask, are there more of these areas in our oceans called sanctuaries, or is there also other protected areas just by the very nature, because it cannot be, the access to these areas is sometimes not so easy?
Well, they can access anywhere they want, but the word sanctuary is pretty much meaningless because what's the point of having a sanctuary if there's no enforcement? The very fact that Japan is killing whales in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary shows you that it's really doesn't mean anything at all. Well, the only purpose is that we can use it for telling our story, but what they're doing is illegal. It's illegal under international law, but they don't care because they're going to do it anyway. Now, we have all kinds of marine protection areas around the world, but that's where the poachers go. Why? Because there's no enforcement. They take 600,000 sharks a year out of the Galapagos Marine Conservation Area because there's no enforcement. And if what enforcement there is, they're usually bribed, and so nothing gets really done. We had a bit of good luck this morning because there's a major sanctuary in the Pacific that Trump recently opened it up and said, no, I don't believe in sanctuaries. The fishermen are free to go that. But a judge, even this morning, actually ruled that he had no right to do that and that the sanctuary is to be protected. But again, there's nobody there actually protecting it. It's all on paper. All of this stuff is on paper. In the United Nations conference in Nice in June, they ratified the High Seas Treaty. And that's great. It's a wonderful victory and everything, but it means nothing because nobody's going to enforce it. There is a complete lack of economic and political will on the part of governments, all governments, to uphold international conservation law. Industrialized fishing companies get what they want. The whaling companies get what they want. The oil companies get what they want. They just hire lawyers to skirt around the law, and they get away with it. And if you go after them, then they will use their powers or offices like Interpol to persecute and try and stop you.
Thank you for saying that. I think what I hear and how I see it is, many things could be meaningless if we or many don't put their effort behind it and make basically others come along us, whether we fight for that or we peacefully protest for us, sometimes the best laws and legislations you're saying are meaningless if we are not living up by whatever we think is so meaningful for all of us. Independent, in the best case, I think, from where we come from, whatever country, but that we recognize, I think, what some or of what most value, for example, species like in the ocean or nature itself and the planet itself is for us as human beings. Isn't it like that, Paul?
What do you mean as for us as human beings?
That in other words, heading to the third item, we need to protect, and by us standing up or legislation can help maybe, but it is only powerful if all the people and not only governments really say we need this because it's so important for all life and for us as humanity to have protected spaces or protected nature, a conservation of your nature or species. Otherwise, isn't it like that, Paul?
Well, we have a need for sanctuaries, but there's,
Yeah.
like I said, there's a lack of economic and political will to uphold these sanctuaries because people are making money. The fishing industry, the industrialized fishing industry, is destroying life in the ocean. It exists because of massive subsidies. The commercial industrialized fishing operations wouldn't exist without about $90 billion a year in subsidies. The UU, for example, supports these giant super trawlers. They couldn't make a profit on their own. They're completely subsidized. And they're literally pulling life out of the ocean at an incredible rate. Why? Because for politics. There's two industries that politicians will not offend: fishing and farming. And they basically, farmers and fishermen can do anything they want, and they get away with anything they want. When I was in the Galapagos, the fishermen's their quota on sea cucumbers had been exceeded. The government said, nope, no more. We're not going to, no more sea cucumbers. What they do? They rioted. They threatened to kill turtles in the Galapagos National Park. They burned down a ranger station. They kidnapped people. And what did the government of Ecuador do? Gave them exactly what they wanted. Whatever they wanted, they got. I even coined a word for it called homopeshophobia, which is politicians' fear of fishermen, because politically, fishermen and farmers are extremely powerful. And as far as I can see, the fishing industry has the potential to destroy life on this planet. If you undermine the marine ecology, you can cause incredible diminishment of diversity and interdependence, which leads to ecological collapse. Since 1950, we've already lost 40% of all the phytoplankton in the sea. 40% of those aquatic species that provide up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe. And the reason that we've lost 40% of the phytoplankton is because the phytoplankton need certain nutrients in order to survive, primarily magnesium, iron, and nitrogen. And those elements are provided by the feces of whales and dolphins and seabirds and other creatures. And when you lower the populations of whales and dolphins and sea turtles and seals and other creatures, you lower the amount of elements that are going into the ecosystem, which leads to the diminishment of the most important aquatic plants on the planet. In fact, the most important plants on the planet, because the forests of the world only produce about 30% of the oxygen. Phytoplankton produces 70%. But for the most part, people are unaware of that. They don't care about it. What's that got to do with me? I just want my fish. So this planet was never made for 8 billion meat-eating, fish-eating primates. Never made for that. It's unnatural. And most of the fish that's caught in the ocean, I guess about 40% of the fish caught in the ocean isn't eaten by people. It's fed to chickens and pigs on factory farms or to salmon on domestic salmon farms. So we're catching all the small fish, especially the super trawlers that are operating in the English Channel and off the coast of Ireland. They're getting, giant nets the size of buses, pulling them in on the hour. And they're just full of these small fish that are ground up into fish meal to be a cheap source of protein for factory farms. So even when you're eating a hamburger, you're eating a fish. So this is the world we live in. where chickens eat more fish than all the puffins and seagulls in the world, where pigs eat more fish than all the sharks in the world. It's a very unnatural world. It's a world out of balance. And this is able to continue because of the perspective on nature, which is anthropocentric. To us, it's all about us. We're the only important species. All the other species are unimportant. We're the dominant species. It's all for us. And if we continue with that kind of attitude, then we're going to drive ourselves to extinction because it's a violation of three basic laws of ecology. First, the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. Second, the law of interdependence, that all species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And third, the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth and a limit to carrying capacity. And when one species like ours steals the carrying capacity of other species, that causes diminishment in diversity and interdependence, and that leads to ecological collapse. The laws of ecology are very simple, but most people don't really understand it, nor do they care, because our entire focus as a species is on a fantasy interpretation of reality. That's why every single religion is anthropocentric. Every single dominant religion says that we're made in the image of some god. Every single dominant religion says that we're number one. It was all created for us, which when you think about it is completely absurd. You're living on a planet 4 billion years old, and we as a species only been around for a couple 100,000 years, but we actually believe this is all created just for us, for our intended use. And we don't seem to care about our relationship with other species. We do not live on this planet without bees and worms and trees and phytoplankton. We simply don't. A reporter asked me once, I said, did you say that worms, trees, bees, and whales are more important than people? I said, yes, I said exactly that. And he said, well, that's outrageous. How could you say something like that? And I said it because they are more important than we are for a very simple reason. They can live here without us. We cannot live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. And as soon as we, humble ourselves to understand that that is the nature of natural law, then the better our chances for survival. But right now, the outlook doesn't look very bleak. I mean, we're right in the midst of a climate change conference that, in the middle of this climate change problem that most people don't refuse to recognize, despite the fact that we're seeing the impact every single day in floods and storms and wildfires. Everything's out of control, but you don't hear that on the mainstream news. They always come up with some other excuse for it. Our world is being destroyed by the fossil fuel industry. It's being destroyed by industrialized fishing operations. It's being destroyed by the poisoning of the earth through the use of herbicides and pesticides and bactericides and fungicides. This is what we are destroying the planet that we live in. And we have the audacity to think that, well, it's all about us. And it's just not going to work out for us.
No, it will not. And therefore it's so important. And again, that people like you stood up already not years, but decades ago, and you still continue to be engaged like not many others. And again, I said it to you last time in our interview, you are an example. And I want to again highlight again a little. I think it's so important, your clarity, your loud voice, and the kind of people, the supporters you gained and gathered over time behind your cause. What we also discussed briefly in the beginning again, you said at some moment, hey, you have to do basically what you are good at. And you understood at some point it's the engagement for marine wildlife, and maybe most prominently for the whales nowadays, seen like that. I want to add again, I did not know, again, from that perspective about sanctuaries, but I want to, again, shed a little bit of light why I came across sanctuaries. And I was actually, and I'm involved with a nonprofit organization called Sanctuaries of the Masters. And it's now because I have had it and I'm heading also that organization. It's a partner organization of our organization here, Juventum, for global education. The kind of project or the perspective we see with that kind of organization is to create new living communities on this planet. But I see it as broad as it can be seen. What we need is really life sustains life. In other words, all living creatures, and as you said, in particular, we as human beings need to realize what we need. We need a healthy planet, let's call it like that. We need all other kind of species in good shape, so to say, and the ocean and the air and all kinds of things need to be in a much better state. There is a lot which has caused so much harm, so much, yeah, how you can call that, contamination, whatever kind of disasters what happened and still happen on this planet, which is so detrimental ultimately for all life, but ultimately also for us. We will not make it if that gets not revitalized. In other words, the mission must also be to revitalize Earth and to revitalize, I would say, all kind what is then better pulsing, flowing, even better with taking out all pollution, which is not so easy. But one key aspect is we need to protect some spaces. And I want to highlight it is also sacred spaces. There is something, we are not here exclusively, as you said. Creation has created all, but there is probably something more, if I just want to highlight, if we don't discuss religion, but in a sense, how does a cell and something, whatever is coming out of the two cells, and then, let's say, by precision, getting into us, a human being. What is really happening there? This is not random how it's happening. It's true for most other species and plants, animals, however you distinguish this. True. So there is something about creation. There is something how this is working. And I just want to say we need to have people who do the right thing for nature, for all life on this planet, on this planet, sorry, whether it's for sea life, for marine wildlife, for all kinds of nature, because it's so important for us. Don't you also think so?
Yes, but I think that we have to accept the fact that we're not different than any other species, that we're not more important, and we're not going to survive if unless we do that. I mean, we also have to understand what this planet is really. It's a water planet. It should be called the planet ocean, but it's water in constant circulation. Sometimes it's in the sea, and sometimes in ice, sometimes underground, sometimes in the clouds, and sometimes it's in the cells of every single living plant and animal. So that same water is moving through all of those mediums. So when kids, for instance, ask me, what is the ocean? I said, well, the answer is we are the ocean. This planet, everything on it is the ocean, because the ocean is moving through us each and every day. The water that's in your body was once recently in an animal. It could be an elephant. It could be in a tree. It's flowing through all of those mediums and then into the ocean, into the clouds. So it's the element water that connects us with everything, to everything else. And
Yeah, thank you.
therefore,
Thank
if
you so
anything is sacred on this planet, it has to be water. And we shouldn't be wasting it. We should be taking care of it. And we should respect the fact that it's what connects us all, holds us all together.
Yeah, thank you for saying all that. I would still add, I think we are here to live together. We are all here on the planet, on Mother Earth, and we have to help each other to really protect ourselves, to safeguard again nature, to protect as much as we can, and to come to peace on earth and to protect, if we can even recognize that, what is health, and to get to a more healthier environment on this planet, which is not only beneficial for us but for all. And again, I agree 100% with you. There is no, let's say, superior species, let's put it like that, but every living creature here has a meaning, has a purpose, and is so important.
Right.
So I want to close kind of like what I also said in the beginning. Everyone who comes across this, I hope there is a feeling, a more kind of a call to action, like I coined it, the interview with Charlie in December. a call to action that we all recognize. We need to call for these kind of projects, these kind of causes, whether it's your kind of long-standing or already effort for protection of marine wildlife, or whether it's where I'm interviewing you from. And again, I'm grateful for your support from the very beginning as a prominent supporter, what I coined as global education. And wherever people feel they can lend a hand, whether they can spread the word, whether they can just have the kind of good conversation with a friend about these topics, or whether they can support by even financially, but again, just being peaceful or just being friendly or just recognizing the value of all life and how we live in the best case in harmony, and especially in harmony with nature. I think this is so important. But this is kind of what I see as a good closing or call for action. And so I want to highlight again, please continue to support your Paul Watson Foundation. And again, thank you for having had the time here, Paul, again. And I hope maybe at some moment I can speak with you again and we update where we stand, basically, what all has happened and is still happening. And again, I would still add, you are a pioneer. I think with the effort, the kind of courage, the kind of persistence, and with, I would say, a lot of adversity, a lot of things which came in your way, but you are still standing and you're still fighting for, I would say, for what's so important, because it's so important for all of us or for all life.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so with that, I want to conclude and want to say again, all the best for all. It's so important in these times. And I would say, again, life is for living, but life can only happen if we protect the very foundations of life. And it's probably, as you said, Paul, water is so important, the oceans is so important, and ultimately all other life forms and Mother Earth or the planet is also so important for us from a human perspective to continue having a better life under better conditions, hopefully, than years and still nowadays before and nowadays. And we hopefully recognize how we can come together for whatever causes to make life for us and life on the planet for all much, much better. With this, again, Paul, thank you so much. And I hope we can maybe speak again at some moment. But again, for the moment, again, thank you so much. And to everyone, take good care. And again, all the best. Thank you.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Paul.